Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax guys. How do you like this Rubik's Cube?
Hey, that looks like my wallet.
Yeah, $1 bill.
$1 on all 6 sides.
Yeah, it actually got each takes 2 sides to show the entire face of a bill. But that works. This one's actually a little bit of a challenge to solve, based on you've got to figure out exactly where each piece goes, and
Are you a member of the Rubik's Cube of the Month Club or something? Because you have
not really. I've just collected quite a few of them over the course of my life. But
I bet you have a shelf at your house that has all those.
Actually, I've got one of those blue canvas FAIRtax bags that is filled to the brim with them.
There.
I really do. I don't have that here right in front of me. I'll see if I can bring that next time. But it is. I'll tell you what.
I mean, I'm amazed though. This guy, folks, if you have never watched the show before and you wonder what we're talking about, we're going to talk about the FAIRtax in a minute. But Bob Paxton can do the Rubik's Cube in record time. I've seen it happen live and in living color. And then he has this giant one that takes him a while.
Yeah. And then I'm not sure that it's record time. Record time is like under 5 seconds, and it takes me about a minute and a half. But
still, you're as far as people that I know, you're the man. You're the guy.
All right. Well, I tell you, let me mention real quickly, if you did not see last week's FAIRtax Power Radio show, you really need to go back and check that one out. We were talking with John Richardson, an attorney from Canada, and we were dealing with a subject that really doesn't come up a great deal, because I say it was a fairly small population of people that this problem, affects, but it is a major, major problem for these folks. And of course, that's talking about American citizens living outside the United States and what the American tax system does to them. And that's just another good reason to let's pull the whole thing out by the roots and replace it with the FAIRtax. And of course,
a lot of people that live overseas that are citizens of the United States, and they are citizens or they have a card to work in another country, that have to deal with the United States penalties in the tax code that basically confound them on a regular basis. And that last week's episode is one to watch.
Suggest you go to the FAIRtax Guys YouTube channel and check that out. But talking about convincing people that we need to rip the income tax code out by the roots and replace it with the FAIRtax is the reason that we do our Congress.gov segment, which we skipped over last week so we could have as much time to talk to John as possible. But it's back, and it's actually kind of mundane this time. There's not a whole lot of really crazy stuff, but there's one that I want to get to.
Time for everybody, right?
Okay. Well, let's start off with this one. This is and none of these have any text in them, so I couldn't go through and dig out any more detail than I get asked out of the description that's published here. But HR 8214 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to make permanent certain provisions of Public Law 115-97 affecting individuals. I have no clue what Public Law 115-97 is, or what provisions are in there that have to do with the Internal Revenue Code that they want to make permanent. But I note that the anything you say make permanent talks to the shifting sand nature of our tax code, where something's temporary and then they'll make it permanent and then they'll take it away and then they'll put it back. And you just can never tell what the tax code is going to say about any particular subject, because it keeps changing constantly.
Well, if you'd like for me to tell you about this tax revision, Public Law 115-97 was enacted in late 2017, substantively changing the federal income tax system.
Oh, you looked it up?
Yeah, man, I got it right here. I got a computer in front of me.
Oh, okay.
Broadly for individuals, the act temporarily modifies income tax rates. Some deductions, credits, and exemptions for individuals are eliminated, while others are substantively modified. 2017.
Wow. Okay. Well, anyway, that HR 8214 wants to make some of those provisions in there that are currently temporary to make them permanent.
Of course.
Okay, here's another one. This is S4475, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to allow a business credit for gain from the sale of real property for use as a manufactured home community, add your favorite phrase, for other purposes.
We can figure something else to do with, but pretty much everything in the tax code other than what it was intended for.
So does that say if you sell your property to somebody who's going to turn it into a manufacturing home community, that you get a tax credit of some kind?
You're not going to cut hay anymore. I'm going to put mobile homes on it. Yeah.
All right. Moving right along. HR 8190, to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to treat certain assisted reproduction expenses as medical expenses of the taxpayer. One question for you on that one. Does that one go into the Hall of Shame or not?
It's a candidate for at least, you're in the top 15 with that one for sure.
Okay.
It might make it into the top 10 before the end of the year.
Okay. Assisted reproduct. Now, I don't know how many people need assistance with their reproductive activities, but I guess I did look this up. That's actually referring to medical treatments to deal with infertility.
Okay.
So it's not what really comes to mind when you first hear that. But just to think of it, that the Internal Revenue Code, our tax code, has a provision in it how to treat assisted reproduction expenses. And I don't see why those wouldn't be medical expenses to begin with. But anyway, that's just
they're focusing in on that one or two little things that have to happen there. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have to see if that one makes the Hall of Shame or not as at the end of the year as we go on. HR 8184, to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to expand housing investment with mortgage revenue bonds and for other purposes.
Oh, yeah.
So again, and one more, HR 8167, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to repeal certain excise taxes relating to firearms and for other purposes. So the first one we talked to was to make permanent certain provisions of Public Law 115-97. And then the last one here, you want to repeal certain excise taxes relating to firearms and for other purposes. Again, the key point of the whole thing is the tax code keeps changing so rapidly and so dramatically, you cannot plan for the future, because what's a good decision under today's tax law becomes a really bad one under next year's tax law. And we need to get rid of the whole stinking system and replace it with a fair tax. That's why we go through these things and show people what the Congress critters are trying to do to them.
And the productivity of businesses, if you're a large enough company where some of these, I mean, in some small operations, a proprietorship or something, or a small LLC, you're probably not going to have to deal with some of the complexities that larger businesses do. But can you imagine not having to deal with all of that? The brain power of the owners and the management and of those companies would send that business into the stratosphere, just for the fact that they didn't have to deal with the complexities of tax code compliance.
Yeah, well, I think you inadvertently maybe hit on one of the reasons that big business is kind of cool to the fair tax. They are the ones that can afford the lobbyists, that can afford the tax attorneys, and They feel that they can use the tax code to gain themselves a competitive advantage by doing things that the other folks don't have the resources to do. And I don't know if you're going to put on your philosopher's hat here and say, that ain't right. Let's treat everybody the same.
Right, and I agree with you. I think getting rid of the Internal Revenue Service and 16th Amendment is and changing from income to consumption is going to be on the order of taking an antibiotic for a virus. You know, when you take that antibiotic, the first couple of days, you take the Z-Pack and you're doing and it rallies, that virus rallies a little bit, and then finally it's gone. I think that's what we're going to deal with when we actually are to the point of replacing the income tax with a tax on consumption, specifically the fair tax.
Yes. So first order of business is to convince people that the income tax needs replacing. Most people just don't pay it in your minds. It doesn't bother me. They have no
Hey, I'm going to buy a
clue.
big TV. I'm going to buy a giant TV April, whatever day I get my tax code, my tax refund,
Yeah, that's the politicians have tried to make it as painless as possible so that the people don't revolt against them for what you're doing. And I'll bet you 98% of the people in the country, if you ask them, how much tax did you pay last year, they couldn't answer it. They would tell you either the amount of money they had to add to their tax bill, how much they had to send in on April 15th, or they'd say, I didn't have to pay anything. I got money back.
Yeah.
The tax system has just so thoroughly brainwashed the American public that they don't really realize just how bad it is, which is, again, one of the reasons why we like to do this Congress.gov segment here on FAIRtax Power Radio and show people what's in there. Oh, I need to ask you, too. You were talking about you want to get an interview with Virginia Fox to get into what's all this with other purposes and stuff. You've been able to do that?
I want somebody to be able to tell us, and it could be any candidate or anyone in office. Virginia just happens to be my she's because of redistricting in North Carolina, she was my representative, then she wasn't. And now she's running back in the district that I'm in. I haven't moved in all of this.
Yeah.
I'm still in the same I'm still in the same place, but she is back to being my representative. So I want to get in touch with her. And I figured I'd wait until after the 4th of July holiday, which is the weekend that we're recording this particular episode. I don't want her to talk about the campaign necessarily. I want to ask her these procedural questions about how a bill is introduced through the tax code, which is what you do every week or so when we talk about Congress.gov and all the machinations that go along. And why is it? Do all of the bills get pushed through the tax code? Those are the things. I have some questions.
Well, hopefully we can get that arranged here on a future episode of FAIRtax Power Radio. We need to move on here. Our time's kind of getting away from us. And I got to say, Scarborough, I am impressed with your pick and shovel skills, all of the things you're able to dig up here. You found another state that wants to get rid of their state income tax. That's good news.
I think the big thing about getting rid of the income tax, when you go in, you got Florida, no income tax. You got Tennessee, other states that don't have a tax on income.
Yeah. Florida and Texas are some of the biggest economies on the planet just by themselves.
Yeah, and there's a governor candidate for governor in Minnesota. He's a GOP candidate, and of course, we have to disclaim that we are nonpartisan. We are simply interested in getting everybody excited about a tax on consumption through the fair tax. So I say GOP governor candidate Scott Jensen. I'm not endorsing him. I'm just saying this is what he's doing. And he is actually doing this to fight inflation. He's real time in the middle of a campaign. And he's talking about
he listened to Wally's World a few weeks ago.
Yeah. And he's actually, this particular story came from StarTribune.com back in the latter part of June. It's been a couple of weeks now. Actually, by the time it airs, it'll be even longer. But his plan, Scott candidate for governor of Minnesota, wants to phase out the state's income tax and veto wasteful spending, is what he calls it. So his sweeping plan to battle inflation includes eliminating the state income tax and cutting government spending, which, of course, is something that could happen at the federal level. If it happens at the local level, the federal is a shoo-in, in my opinion. I think once people realize what an income tax taken out of their daily lives, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, I think they'll figure out, this is real.
Of course, Alabama, Georgia, and Nebraska are the three that are farthest along in their efforts to replace their state income tax. See, here in Florida, I can't really tell you what the effect of replacing the income tax with the consumption tax is, because we don't have an income tax.
Right.
But if a state like Alabama or Georgia can replace their state income tax with a consumption tax modeled on the fair tax, which both of them are trying to do that. And the folks there can get the comparison between the apples and oranges and see which one works better. Then I bet you'll have a lot of folks that are ready to say, hey, this worked in our state. Let's put this in nationwide.
That's exactly right. So this candidate for governor in Minnesota is working to do that. South Dakota is a neighbor that is also void of income tax in the state. But imagine what that's going to do for business. Imagine what that's going to do for personal income. You immediately get that credit, that you get that money back right away. And if you look at the federals, if you look at your stub at the end of the pay period, and you see, and look at it wait until the end of the year. Well, we're halfway through the year now. So look at it now and look at that and multiply by 2, and you'll realize all the money that's sitting out there that's yours that you talk about getting back when you get the refund back. But if you look at it right now, that money that is in your part of the federal income tax, old age Social Security benefits, Social Security tax, et cetera, it's not going to be taken out. Imagine what you'd be able to do with that.
Most pay stubs would have a year to date, compilation of how much withholding, how much payroll tax and stuff has been. Go check that out. And I'll bet you would be surprised at how much of your money has been taken away from you, and you don't even realize it, because all you look at when you get your paycheck is the net pay. Yeah, you don't pay any attention to how much the government takes from you.
Right.
Which is exactly what the politicians had designed it, which is exactly why we need to pull their system out by the roots and put our system in.
And that brings me to another point. The fair tax is a quarter century of investment in time and money and understanding from economists, not from politicians. And I think that's important to note, because you look at the Internal Revenue Service, you look at that whole mechanism, politicians, not economists. The economists came up with, you go back to 1913 and you talk about the 16th Amendment, and hey, this is really great. We're only going to tax a percent up to $20,000, between $4,000 and $20,000, or we're going to kind of go to 3% if you earn $50,000 or more. And called upon the House Ways and Means Committee called upon the citizens to, quote, cheerfully support and sustain this, the fairest and cheapest of all taxes. That's what the income tax was sold as.
All right, real quickly, let's give credit to the article you're looking at here.
Yes, Star Tribune. The Bill of Rights in action.
Yeah, the Constitutional Rights Foundation.
Yes,
the crf-usa.org has this the income tax amendment. Most thought it was a great idea in 1913. Most people think it's a thoroughly rotten idea now.
Well, and the first tax collection day under the new law took place on March 1st in 1914. Now, of course, since the average worker earned about $800 a year, few people actually had to pay federal income tax. Less than 4% of American families made an annual income of $3,000 or more. Deductions and exemptions further shrank the pool of taxpayers. Nevertheless, the federal government collected $71 million that first year. Millionaire John D. Rockefeller alone paid an estimated $2 million.
So that sounds like the wealth envy argument sold the nation on the income tax, and they fell for the politicians' line that says, we're not going to hit you, we're just going to hit the rich people. So go ahead and give us this authority, if you would, please, because they needed the Constitution amended to make that happen. The Supreme Court threw out income taxes as unconstitutional in like 1894. And, it's insane. But what happened in just the few years after the income tax was implemented?
Oh my gosh. A few years after it was ratified, the World War One came into view. And as in the Civil War, the Congress turned the income tax to quickly raise amounts of money to fight the war. In 1917, Congress lowered the standard exemption to $1,000 for
Meaning your first $1,000 is not taxed, but everything else is.
Right. At the same time, the lawmakers increased the base rate from 1% to 2%. So it came down to 1,000 and went from 1% to 2%, doubling the amount, basically. Those earning over $1 million were taxed at the unheard of rate. Talk about who's paying what. Who funded the war? The millionaires did. If you made over $1 million back in 2017, you were taxed at
That's 1917.
Oh, did I say 20?
Yes, you did. That's a 5-yard penalty.
Because I'm living in the now. I'm living in 1917, lawmakers increased the base tax rate from 1% to 2%. If you earned over $1 million back then, you were paying 50% of your income.
Oh, no, but that's not all.
It rose to 77% by the end of the war.
Can you imagine having to fork over 77 cents out of every dollar you make to the government? And that is the kind of power that the government has under the income tax system. They can set the rates to anything they want to.
It's incredible. Federal receipts with the increases climbed from under $1 billion in 1917 to nearly $4 billion in a year's time. At the war's end, about 60% of federal money came from the income tax, replacing tariff, duties, excise taxes as a main source of revenue for the government. And
now you can jump back into the here and now. 80 years after all this happened, what's going on here?
The ratification of the 16th Amendment occurred, and 80 years later, the income tax, of course, is what it is. You hear Congress.gov every few weeks here on FAIRtax Power Radio. In 1913, $71 million. The federal government currently collects over $500 billion with a B in income taxes every year. Plus,
that's from individuals.
Plus another $117.5 billion from corporations.
Where do you think the corporations get that $117.5 billion? Out of our pockets by raising their prices.
And everybody says, and again, the media has a really hard job of just repeating the same things over and over and over again, like nasty corporations, we need to tax them, and and you hear all of this, but when you get right down to it, the taxpayer, the consumer, we're going to end up footing the bill for all of the tax increases that are placed, regulations that are placed on business. Which brings me to this point: fair tax goes in. We have a tax on consumption instead of a tax on income, and all of a sudden, all of those taxes that the corporation has embedded in the product or service that they're providing goes away, and now you're left paying the tax on consumption. You're going to end up with more money in your pocket, even after you have more money in your pocket from the taxes not taken out of your paycheck.
Indeed. Now, down here at the bottom of this article, we're kind of running quick on time, got 4.5 minutes left. For discussion in writing, the author of this thing kind of wanted people to think. And the first question he asked, why do you think the income tax was much more popular in 1913 than it is today? Well, that's a really easy one. It ain't the same animal. The income tax in 1913 versus the income tax today is like comparing a kitten to a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Well, and the same thing was the threshold was so high. Most people didn't earn near where that bottom threshold was back in 1913. It was 1%. You had to make at least $4,000 to just get to have to be paying that tax back then.
Of course, now he asks, what's the best tax system? He gives you three choices: a graduated income tax, flat tax, which actually should say flat income tax,
Right.
and then value added tax, which is what they have in Europe. We need to educate the author here on the fair tax.
Yeah, there's a bunch of people out there writing stuff about taxes, and they don't really consider a tax on consumption as the great equalizer. And it puts us back in control. It's a liberty and freedom thing, like we were talking about with John Richardson on our previous episode. We've sort of fallen into this really nasty trap of the income tax, and we're subservient. What did he say? He said it should be the country with a government, not the government with a country. I think that was the comment that John made. I think
that's pretty amazing. But it is just astounding what the income tax has morphed into from its original implementation. And so it has come into something that needs to be as extinct as a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Right. And we can replace it with that kitten again. We can replace the T-Rex with a kitten by getting rid of the income tax and implementing the fair tax.
I would like to mention the website for just a moment, because we've been talking about fair tax. FAIRtax.org. There's an FAQ section on there. There's also a 1040 club that you can join. It's $10.40 a month. And of course, it's the tax form. Kind of clever in that respect. But you can fund a little bit about what we're doing here. The volunteers, it takes a little bit to run the program, but nobody Bob doesn't make any money. I don't make any money on.
Yeah, all fair tax people are volunteers, including Steve Hayes, the president of the organization.
And we could use people that are out there watching and listening to the program. You need to consider how you can help, and we would love to help you figure out what you can do. You can get in touch with us. What Gmail is the FAIRtax?
The FAIRtax guys at gmail.com is our email address. Of course, we have a Facebook page as well. We have a website, FAIRtax Guys, without the in front of it, fairtaxguys.com. And so there's lots of ways to get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to help you or put you in touch with somebody. Hopefully we find somebody there locally where you are that can help you. Wow. In fact, one of the things on fairtax.org up there is a leaders list by state. So you can look and see who the fair tax leader in your state is. If your state is one that isn't mentioned, and I think about 40 of them are there. There are very few that don't have at least one person mentioned. But again, we'll be happy to help folks get a fair tax organization going in their state as well.
Right. Fairtax.org. Go there and get in touch with us on the social media too. You can make comments on the YouTube channel and also on the Facebook channel when the show's going on. And don't forget to look into joining the 1040 Club, because that helps everybody. That puts some gas in the engine, so to speak, and it'll help us get the word out. And we would love to have as many people as possible. This is an organization that is very, very welcoming, and you'll feel jazzed up about it like I do, because I get up in the morning and I go, you know what? Today's a day that we're going to make one more step toward bringing the fair tax into existence in this country.
All right. Well, I am still going to bring my Mega Minx up to the radio station in October and show you how this works. But for now, we have got to say sayonara. This is we have used up all our time again. So again, thank you for watching and listening to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
The FAIRtax guys are reminding you that the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you will demand it.
So tell me, how could I pay less taxes?
Less?
Yeah, I'm trying to get ahead, so how can I pay less?
Well, I suppose you could pay less taxes by earning less money, or you could give to charity.
How is that going to help?
Actually, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but if you know the right people, okay, or if you have a really good lawyer, you can usually get around the big ones.
If I may, under the fair tax, to pay less taxes, you would simply consume less. You would control how much you pay and when you pay your taxes simply by choosing what you purchase and when you purchase something.
So I could stay focused.